Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show right here on the World Crypto Network. Guys, thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday afternoon. As usual, we have a lot to talk about here. We're going to be talking about Lightning. We're going to be talking about LedgerX and even a little bit about Sweden, you know, everybody's favorite place to go vacation in the mountains. We got a bunch of awesome guests, guys. I want to introduce them right now. Actually, before we do that, I want to go through some announcements and then announce our awesome panelists, our amazing panelists that are here to talk Bitcoin, our favorite thing to do on Sundays. All right, guys. So first announcement is the Coindesk. I don't know if you guys have heard, but Coindesk has recently started this year's most influential people, right? Popularity contest out there going. And they actually have a few nominees that are here in the World Crypto Network. So I'm going to have to say, guys, please go out there and vote for Tone Vays, Jimmy Song, or Thomas Hunt of the World Crypto Network for the most influential people in 2017, because you guys know that we're here every day, every Sunday and every day with morning shows and weekly shows talking about Bitcoin, bringing you guys the best news, the most honest news that we can find. So I really appreciate if you guys could vote up on that. And then I also did an interview with one Mr. Andy Hoffman that is actually appearing on this show today. So you guys can check that out when you get a chance. I have the link in the show notes for that. And then finally, just a little bit of a reminder, as if it needs reminding, Bitcoin hit over $6,100 this week, you guys, pushing it over 600% this year for profits and rise, and it's just blowing my mind. I know it's blowing everybody else's mind. I was reading articles that were like, 6,000 by mid next year, but no, this thing is exploding faster than anybody can imagine. So this is really great. I know all my hodlers out there are super happy. Our long-term thinkers are super happy. So you guys, congratulations to you. And without further ado, let's introduce our guests. So we'll go from the left to the right on my side. Mr. Andy Hoffman, how you doing today, Andy? Thanks so much for joining us. Andy Hoffman, the proprietor of CryptoGoldCentral.com. Andy, how are you?
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Just got the tweet in time.
Awesome, man. So thank you so much for joining us. I try to put the show together as best I can, guys, but I figured, you know what, at the last minute, I was like, we need Andy in this show. So I messaged him, and he really took up the call and took up the mantle and decided to join us. So thank you, Andy, for at the last minute joining us. We know we're gonna have a lot of good conversation here about Bitcoin. Right next to him, we got Francis Pouliot, the co-founder and head of research of Cadillacsy.com. Francis, how are you? Oh, you're muted, sir.
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, of course, it's a great day. It's been a great week. Obviously, can't complain. So I think everybody in Bitcoin is pretty happy right now. Pretty good vibes coming from the community. So yeah, it's great to be on and talk with you guys about Bitcoin.
Absolutely, man. We got over 300 live viewers already, and we haven't even finished the introductions, people. So let's keep going, guys. Thanks so much for joining us again. We got John Carvello, the CEO of Exo Media, joining us once again. John, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks so much for being here, man. We really appreciate your advice on here. And without further ado, let's introduce the special guest, Jack Mallers himself, creator of the Lightning wallet, Zap. Jack, how you doing?
I am phenomenal. I've been following everyone's work on this panel for a long time. So thank you guys so much for having me.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate you. You know, you're a young guy, Jack, and we really are going to, appreciate your millennial type of advice. We want to know from you a little bit. What's it like? You know, I mean, you've been in Bitcoin for a couple of years now, and as a young guy, I mean, just really quick, just off the top, what has it been like, kind of growing up with Bitcoin at such a young age?
It has been outstanding. I mean, I'm probably a little younger than most of my friends. I'm trying to slowly breed them in one by one, get them in a big group chat. But it's amazing, dude. I mean, no matter the age, this industry is happening. It's a lot of fun. Every day is an interesting day, good or bad. So
awesome, man. Awesome, man. We're so glad to have smart young minds like yourself in the Bitcoin community, Jack. We're really proud to have you here. So let's get into it right away, guys. Let's go ahead and go with the first topic. So with Charlie Lee, the creator of Litecoin, recently completing some on-chain atomic swaps and the Lightning wallets, releasing newer and newer versions, and then the recent uptick of segwit usage over 17%. I want to ask Jack, from your opinion, like how soon can we really expect a significant portion of transactions to run over the Lightning Network?
I knew that was coming.
You know it, man. You know it.
So yeah, my guess is probably just as good as everyone else's. There's no, dates set in place because this technology is financial technology and there's no serious rush here. If I had to guess, though, I would say that we would start seeing mainnet payments before the year's end. So we'll see, though. As far as adoption goes, there's some assumptions that come with Lightning as far as the network and capacity and so I think before year's end we'll see mainnet usage, and I bet in 2 years Lightning will be widely adopted. Would be my quote. You can quote me on that guess.
All right, well, that's pretty awesome, Jack. So real quick, let me ask you, what have you really done recently, besides this amazing wallet, this Lightning wallet called Zap that people can download that's in beta right now? We have a link to that in the show notes as well. What work have you done with Lightning in addition to that or surrounding that? Because I think you've also done some atomic swaps with Charlie Lee, right?
I actually haven't done with Charlie Lee. But yeah, so just to be clear, I'm not part of Lightning Labs or any of the protocol developers. I am just me doing my thing. So speaking on my behalf. But yeah, Zap is probably my first project that people have enjoyed following. I built some gambling software that leveraged the Bitcoin scripting language to kind of remove the middleman a while back, which got me into Lightning. And, the fact that Bitcoin is, the blocks are these scarce resources and that you can't, have, this mainstream app level usage of a blockchain on chain and all that stuff. And I started getting into Lightning and Zap came. So that's all been over the last year or two.
So let me just one quick follow-up question for you, Jack. Do you see Lightning Network evolving in a more centralized manner or in a more decentralized manner? Because we saw the diagram from Lalo at the Lightning team about how all of the different nodes, and it seemed to be very hub and spoke, very decentralized. Not even hub and spoke, sorry, but just very all over the place. Do you see it evolving? Lightning Network itself is all of these hubs and such. Do you see them evolving more in a centralized manner or more in a decentralized manner, where anybody can just start running Lightning channels all over?
Sure, yeah. I mean, decentralized, of course. The hub and spoke idea. So Lightning in itself is a play on payment channels, which have been around in Bitcoin for a long time. And the hub and spoke idea, I think, originated from the unidirectional payment channel, where it could be pushed one way. But there's been a lot of updates, and with HTLCs, these hash time lock contracts and stuff, the hub and spoke model isn't necessarily needed. There are definitely some assumptions made about the topology of the network, and some stuff we'll have to figure out. But I certainly would not classify it as centralized. That's for sure.
Awesome. Yep. I would have to agree. I mean, the way that everybody is developing this, I just don't see this going in any type of centralized manner, because, there is some fear out there about some people saying that Lightning might bring us to a more centralized Bitcoin. And I really just don't see that, given the fact that everything is on chain. Everything is still, decentralized. So we'll go with Francis next. Francis, what do you see the Lightning, how do you see the Lightning network developing, and how rapidly can we expect this type of stuff to start really happening on the mainnet? In mass.
Right. I think at this point, it's mostly going to be an issue of the kind of software and toolkits that are available out there for web developers to integrate kind of Lightning D into their apps, the same way that a lot of web developers, they use some toolkits to interact with their Bitcoin D, which makes it a lot easier. So I think there's a bunch of tools being developed out there. Right now, I think it's going to be some of the small businesses that have really good engineers are playing around with it. There's Bitrefill, for example. They've already integrated the Lightning in there. Actually, one of the engineers that did that is in Montreal right now, so you're going to try to get that included in builds. The way I think these networks, they need bootstrapping, right? They need to have a lot of liquidity to be interesting in the first place, because if you if I launch Lightning Network node on builds, I'm gonna have to have a separate option for Bitcoin and Lightning Network. People need to use it, and then at the beginning there's not going to be that many payment channels open, so people are going to have to make channel transactions, which kind of suck because they need to pay the fee once. So I'm expecting it would need to be severely bootstrapped. Wallets should probably find a way to coordinate and maybe open channels for their users or something like that. Another problem also is they need to be very liquid, and there's going to be a lot of experimentation as to like how long these channels are open. Like, what do you do if you open a channel and you're like, you want your money out? I personally believe that it's going to be a really good business model for people that are holding Bitcoins to provide liquidity to those channels and also to let people cash out, right? So like if your channel is 30 days and you want to get Bitcoins on the mainnet, someone needs to be able to do that for you. So it's kind of liquidity and network effect. What I really like about Lightning is, to me, when I look at all the most exciting technologies, it is Lightning, and it's not just because it scales Bitcoin. It's also just the kind of idea of opening these contracts which can be updated off chain, and then you can. To me, it's financial institutions right now are really interested in smart contracts, and to me, there's no better way to illustrate smart contracts than Lightning Network, being itself a hugely complicated network of very small, simple smart contract functions like multisig and time locks. Atomic swaps are also what I see as the most disruptive thing for financial institutions right now, or one of the most disruptive things, because banks are not really that afraid of Bitcoin right now, because it's not really threatening their core business models. Transactions are core business models, but the biggest business model by far right now is one of the biggest business models is foreign exchange. So if you can have digitized fiat or cryptocurrency fiat and atomic swaps with Bitcoin or with other altcoins, you can have, in effect, like trustless forex with huge amount of liquidity. And this is how the banks make money. This is how PayPal makes money, right? PayPal makes money when you receive currencies in a different account and you convert them. They take a 3.5% spread. So this is something that they're really looking into right now, like decentralized forex, which is atomic swaps. So I see the Lightning Network going in hopefully these institutions would want to provide some liquidity, it's a competitive edge. But in terms of network topology, Jack, you had put something on Twitter. I think you put a photo on Twitter saying like much decentralized. It was kind of like static, right? So can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I'm interested in hearing like what that picture was, and why you're confident that it's going to be decentralized.
Yeah, that I just want to say that image. That's what I was thinking about, that network topology, and it really did look very spread out. So please, Jack, let us know your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So again, this whole hub and spoke idea, which the RBTC or whoever likes to prey on, is a very old idea, and with HTLCs and stuff, it's not necessarily needed. So you need 2 channels established to be a node on the network, I believe, and so that image was just nodes on testnet, and each line connecting them was a channel. And even on testnet now, we can do multi-hop payments and hop between these. And so I don't understand. So don't get me wrong. There will definitely be nodes that are highly connected, and nodes that are more connected than others. Coinbase, for example, I'm making an assumption here that they will have a very highly connected node compared to the one running in my home. But that's okay. I wouldn't define that as centralized though. Centralization is a sliding scale, and decentralization is a sliding scale. So yeah, anyways, that was what the image was just a live shot of the network on testnet, and the circles were nodes themselves and the lines were channels, and just showing how the network was interconnected there.
Very cool. I'm gonna have to link that in the show notes after the show is over. Francis, any follow-up to that?
No, not really. That kind of answers my question. I'm just I think on the LiveNet, where we have real users and real money, we're gonna see probably a more accurate, maybe something different. But Jack, even if it was, so what are the problems that we would have if it did end up being hub and spoke, right? If blockchain.info and Coinbase and all the big, they have like these hugely well-connected nodes, it's still trustless because these are Bitcoin transactions that we're sending to each other. At some point, we can redeem them. What are the negative things they could do? What are the negative side effects? What are the attack vectors of having hub and spoke Lightning Network emerge?
You just don't want these like TTPs and Bitcoin and stuff. We don't want these trusted third parties, right? So we just don't want to rely on any party to route our payments for us. that's the main concern. It leverages Sphinx and onion routing, so these nodes only know who to forward to and where it came from, but they can't learn more about other nodes. And we all know these privacy features and great things. So you're correct in that these are Bitcoin transactions and, still leveraging cryptography. But we just don't want to leverage any central trusted party where if Coinbase was who we went through to make these, comparatively free and cheap and instant transactions, that if the government had an issue with them or if their servers shut down or something, the network should be able to stand on its own feet.
Right. So the issue is more like redundancy, right? So it's not that they can stop it's not that they would stop routing our payments. It's that it could like disappear. We don't want a huge chunk of the Lightning Network to go off suddenly and to have all these nodes that were previously connected be disconnected. Is that it?
Yep. And they could technically stop routing payments. Like a node can just shut itself off or so. I mean, no one can take anyone else's money. But yeah, the hub and spoke just introduces a form of centralization a little bit that in Bitcoin, we pride ourselves on avoiding. So
yeah. And how could the node like differentiate payments? If it wanted to like censor some payments or not other payments, it was my assessment that Lightning Network was more anonymous, but can they still censor some and not others? Or are Lightning channels more fungible than Bitcoin UTXOs or?
You can certainly censor certain channels if you feel. But so I'm doing my best here. I'm no roast beef. So, but it leverages onion routing in the sense that the node routing the payment has no idea how many hops the destination or so. It just knows where the message previously came from and where it's forwarding to. So there's certain data in that communication there that can be leveraged. They're certainly not incentivized to do so, but again, if there was a central party, that would be able to knock all the dynamos down, that would be the security holes. Trusted third parties are not good for security, as we know.
And Vortex, can I ask one more question? Sorry.
Let me think. No, go ahead, man. This is great stuff. No, this is really, really great information about the Lightning Network. I'm going to comment afterwards, of course, but please go ahead.
So is there an incentive model for people to route other people's payments? So do you imagine that it's going to be some kind of business model, or are people doing it because running like Bitcoin, you run your own node because you can validate your own transaction, and that's good enough for you as an incentive? What about Lightning? Is there another incentive, or it's just you want to run your own Lightning node to make sure that your payments get routed?
Yeah, so there's two incentives. One is the traditional like Bitcoin full node incentive where you want to be a validator, right? You have a responsibility to protect yourself and your own money in the same way with the Bitcoin full node that you do with the Lightning node, and holding the other party accountable, which I can try to explain if you want. But then there's the other incentive, the financial incentive, right? So you can set a fee and a price tag and kind of announce to the network like, hey, I'm free to route your transactions. Here's how much I charge. And kind of publicly announce yourself to the network. So people that stake a lot of liquidity in these channels, in these networks, could potentially make money if, a lot of money if the network itself is routing, some serious capital. I can't say too much. I've like verbally agreed, but there's some really, really big companies that are very interested, right? Like if Bitcoin is be your own bank, running a Lightning node is be your own merchant, right? Or be your own payment processor, excuse me. So, be your own bank and then be your own payment processor. And a lot of these companies, you'll start to see, if there's some serious capital routed through this network, the barrier to entry to become a payment processor is zero. You just run a Lightning node. And that becomes super interesting in the same way that running a Bitcoin full node is. So yeah, does that answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's freaking awesome. Lightning allows you to be your own payment processor. I mean, that is really cool because you are allowed to be able to, if this succeeds, route thousands and thousands and then millions and millions and then hundreds of millions of payments. And so this is really, really cool. I mean, this is why I bring Francis on the show, ladies and gentlemen, because he has a real Bitcoin business and he has real questions about, that affect Bitcoin businesses and how he's going to use it, how he's going to use the Lightning and how the Lightning is going to affect his business. So this is really cool. Wallets creating channels between each other. I think that's going to be really interesting to help bootstrap this whole Lightning network, payment channel thing. I think that's going to really help people have built in to be able to just have a simple user interface to quickly go ahead and build a channel. Now, in your wallet called Zap, Jack, you made this really easy, and you have a video about this. I encourage everybody to go check out the video about this Zap wallet that Jack created, and you can see his demonstration. It's very simple. You click new payment channel, you type in the address, and that's it. It really is going to be simple once we get this all worked out. So all the stuff, of course, is in beta. But as somebody pointed out in the chat, they were like, "How come everybody only talks about Lightning stuff in future tense?" And it's like, no, they're doing this now, people. He developed the wallet. The code is there. It's in beta. They've been doing testnet transactions for some time. The topology diagram that we want that they were speaking about earlier was released from one of the Lightning developers about how many payment channels they got going on testnet right now. So this is a real thing, and this is right around the corner. So very cool stuff. And this experiment, the experimentation that we're going to need to do with all these payment channel stuff before we find the right formula, it's going to be great to watch. It's going to be really interesting to see billion-dollar companies get made developing the next, these second layers and how we're going to interact them. And it's really going to make the internet be the biggest stock exchange, the world's biggest stock exchange. It's like it's already the world's biggest library and media entertainment platform, and on and on and on. This is going to make the internet the world's largest stock exchange. So very cool stuff. Just one other side note too. I just got side channeled, but I thought I should mention this since I mentioned the all-time highs. Right, we also hit an all-time high on a mining hash power. So that was like literally 13 exahashes. So you guys, everything is scaling here. Everything is going up, not just the price, the wallets, the mining power, and almost everything you can think of. So very cool. Let us move to the next person here that in line, which is going to be John. John, give us your comments on the conversation so far, and how you see the Lightning Network playing out, and how long you think it'll take.
Sure. Just two topics and sort of questions. The first is, I also have a Bitcoin company, and we, are custodians of value for our customers. And so we're definitely interested in having a way to not have to be that. I want to hold as little information and as little value for the customers as possible. And I hope that one day we'll be able to integrate Lightning that way to do it. But like was mentioned, we're kind of in a wait and see scenario where we're trying to see what kind of software is made and how it's implemented and how we can integrate it into what we're doing, because we're too small to actually be building this kind of stuff ourselves. So hopefully, that the landscape will evolve more quickly. And the question I have on that aspect is basically, would you agree that Lightning is going to be more expensive to provide to customers than doing it the way we're doing it now, centralized and being a custodian, but it'll still be cheaper than doing on-chain transactions, but in effect, to get this quality of like not having to trust us as a custodian, it will ultimately come at a higher fee than previously. What do you think about that?
So let me just rephrase so I make sure I'm answering the right question. The Lightning may be more expensive than operating a centralized system.
For the customer. In other words, right now people can deposit Bitcoin with us, and they pay a transaction fee to send that Bitcoin, and then we manage that amount of Bitcoin in a database. But we can change this so now they don't have to trust us, and eventually have Lightning handle these kinds of things. But there's going to be a cost to setting up Lightning and providing Lightning and having transactions on Lightning, and that whereas I'm wondering if that cost will now be higher because they are getting more than they were before.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, to get onboarded onto Lightning is actually a lot easier. That's one of the jobs I'm trying to help with, right? So, like, for example, Zap and the Lightning desktop wallet that Roast Beef released recently comes packaged with the Lightning Lite client. So you have some form of a node that can, validate these transactions. And all it would take is, one on-chain transaction to establish a relationship with a merchant and therefore the rest of the network through, multi-hop payments and stuff. So I don't think it would be more expensive. I'm assuming you mean by like having to set up infrastructure to kind of onboard yourself. But
well, I also mean just, it's an infrastructure that we do have to be like supporting of, but there's transactions that are happening there that no matter how much you've removed them from the chain, they're still ultimately happening on chain, whereas they weren't happening on chain before.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So there's also like some assumptions that Lightning makes about when people close out and how often people are going to want to have their funds locked up in these channels, and these funds in this relationship with a merchant or other people on the network. So yeah, I mean, if someone is not leveraging Lightning in a way where, you know, they're closing out their channels consistently, and that can be potentially expensive. But the idea being is that once you establish this relationship, you have funds locked up that you're able to use, and you can, you know, like add funds to channels and keep them open. They don't ever have to close. So the idea was that you would then leverage these comparatively free, not totally free, but like, you know, compared to an on-chain payment, essentially free. And you'd be able to leverage those instant payments that way.
Yeah.
Hopefully
The other question I had was, and Francis started to hint at this, is, you know, as far as risks go, do you foresee or have you thought about how scammers might use Lightning to take advantage of people who aren't fully educated about how things work, like locking up their funds in some inconvenient way, or, you know, basically tricking people to get them into channels? Or how do you foresee this affecting the scam landscape?
Yeah, sure. So I actually had a conversation with a Lightning dev on Slack recently, where Lightning is interesting. So Bitcoin is, you know, this financial instrument, but then it's also, you know, the scripting language, and we talk about like programmable money and what that means and stuff. So Lightning is a very interesting attempt to not only, you know, scale blockchains, but also allow these apps and these, you know, programmable money applications to live on a layer that they can scale. And that brings a next like level of security. You're talking about, like, you know, for example, a Chrome extension. You know, someone could potentially inject scripts, and, you know, if someone was just had an open connection to their node, drain with tiny little micropayments so that the node wasn't freaking out, totally like drain a channel or something like that. So there are definitely new security ideas to think about with Lightning that maybe you don't traditionally think about, like, you know, Chrome extension browser security with traditional Bitcoin blockchain on-chain payments. But as far as scams, I don't really know. I mean, Lightning is obviously opt-in. You can use on-chain if you want. And, you know, no one can actually, you know, really lock up funds for too long or take anyone's money because of, you know, how it works. So I'm not too concerned about it personally.
Yeah.
And also, you know, I mean, channels can be created on the fly. I mean, you know, there's all these arguments about how there has to be these huge amounts of capital locked up and things like that for Lightning to be successful. And it's like, I mean, in certain situations, channels can be opened at will, you know, from any person to any person, you know, for a relatively small on-chain fee. So I just don't see, you know, that argument holding up very much. So very interesting conversation, guys, so far. I mean, there's going to be some trade-offs, obviously, you know, when as we go up the layers. But this is how I think that it's going to be the best way to scale while still having security, you know, while still having liberty, while still having the actual censorship resistance of the base layer. So let's get Andy's take on this. And, you know, sorry, Andy, for having you go last. Somebody's always got to go last. We try to randomize the order, but I'm sure the audience is waiting for your opinion on this. Andy, what do you think about this Lightning? Because I know you're not a technical guy or developer, but I mean, you've been following this space so closely, and the way you speak about Lightning and second layer technologies and things, it seems like you have a pretty good grasp. So what is your opinion on when you see this technology kind of taking off now that we see all of this stuff in beta, so much work in beta and on testnet? When do you see all this kind of stuff taking off, and what is your comments on the conversation so far?
Well, first of all, it's so funny. I've been staring at the upper right of my screen at the mute, and I didn't realize that the actual mute button is right in the middle, and I just found it. So thank God. So yes, obviously I'm not an expert in anything technological, nor was I when I worked in the oil field business or the gold mining business. So I will defer to the brilliance on this panel and in the Bitcoin community. The way that I look at it as a financial guy is, of course, you know, how fast will there be adoption as far as the money that goes into the sector to do this? From everything that I hear from these people and all other people, everything's going to get done. As Andrea said, things will scale ungracefully, but then again, maybe they will scale gracefully. So far, what we've seen this year has been a lot more graceful technologically than I would have thought. And now that we're pretty much, you know, if we're not done with the hard fork stuff, we're pretty close. And now that we have segwit activation, the way I see it is 2017, I call the year of appreciation. And 2018 is the year of adoption, because the amount of Wall Street and Main Street and Silicon Valley and all the other Silicon Valleys of the world that's going to come into the sector, that's all in the boardroom right now being discussed what those CapEx budgets are going to be, is going to be something on the order of the internet in the end of the 1990s. How it will play out, I don't know, because everything in Bitcoin plays out much faster and much more unpredictably than you would expect. But I have a feeling that what Jack says about 2 years from now, that we won't even believe that, that it was so archaic today, is going to be right on.
Absolutely. I mean, this is how these networks continue to evolve, up the layer and up the stack they go. I mean, I don't think anybody foresaw the internet having, HD video and then 4K video and then on and on. Jack, did you have something to comment on that?
I was just going to comment. I was just reading through the chat and grazing through, and there's some questions about or concerns about Lightning being really complicated and like this idea of locking up funds that, John had mentioned. So I was just going to try and clear that up if that's cool. So you guys let me know if I lose you. This is how I describe it to my friends. So just interrupt. But I grew up playing competitive chess, and in chess, players keep state of the board by notations. We write each move in notation, and we each have a copy of, this ledger that, if played through, from 0 to end, you can, get the state of the current board of where the pieces are, right? And sometimes, like when you would go get up and get a snack or something, people would try and cheat and move the pieces on the board and, claim a false representation of the state of the board. And the way that you would dispute that is there was a chess arbiter that you can go and give your ledger essentially of notations to the arbiter and say, this is, the actual copy, and the arbiter then can forfeit the other player. And in Lightning, it works, almost the same way, in a sense that, when you're having these HTLCs flying back and forth, you're constantly updating the state. And if someone were to try and, publish a poor state, if I were to say, Vortex, I'm publishing to the blockchain that you have 0 Bitcoin and I have all of the ones that were in the channel, you can actually go with cryptographic proof to the arbiter, which is the Bitcoin blockchain, and say, listen, I have cryptographic proof that this person is wrong. I can replicate the actual correct state. And then not only am I, I don't get to, falsely claim state, but then you get to sweep all of my funds as well. So I'm disincentivized to even try. So anyways, I was just reading through comments and John brought that up. So hopefully that makes sense. And I just wanted to clear that up.
Very cool. Very cool. Does anybody have anything to comment on that before we move to our next topic? No? Okay.
Just a quick thought for Jack. So I really like to model stuff, and I'm not sure how to model the adoption of Lightning. So perhaps you can kind of maybe help me understand. Say that Exotica adopts Lightning like a year after it came out. Let's say that there's like a year after now. Imagine how many of these channel transactions are people actually going to have to open? If John's connected to Bills, for example, and I'm connected to like Quadriga and some like 3 other exchanges, and blockchain.info is automatically connected with Coinbase, or something like that. What are the odds that when someone goes on Exotica using his Zap wallet or like Electrum or any wallet that is now like Lightning Network compatible, that he's going to have to open a channel like for Exotica? Do you imagine this is going to be some kind of like the amount of channels that people are going to have to open is like decreasing over time? Or how do you see that coming out? Because the way I understand it, it's very likely that John's going to be connected to someone, and that the Exotica client is like already connected to John, doesn't need to open a new channel in most of the cases. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I can give it my best shot. Again, there are certainly some assumptions with Lightning. They don't carry any negative consequences, but assumptions that, so for example, we don't know how expensive a multi-hop payment is going to be. Like if I want to route through 8 other nodes in like a free market, I'm not totally sure how expensive that's going to be, and if it would make more sense to open a channel with a certain portion of the network that would connect me for future reference and stuff. So yeah, Roast Beef wrote this super cool feature called Autopilot on LND, which actually manages your channels for you and opens and closes channels, you know, that's totally configurable. So that UX is already being worked on as far as, you know, having to mentally manage that yourself. So, you know, like I spun up Zap and, you know, put some Bitcoin on there, and then I look down and I already have 3 open channels and I'm, you know, relatively connected to the network. As far as like costs go, how expensive is it going to be to constantly onboard yourself to the Lightning Network? I don't imagine too expensive. I would assume that, you know, the network is relatively connected where, you know, if you connect to Coinbase or, you know, wherever you have your wallet or so, that they are connected to some of the main merchants and where people spend Bitcoin. So I would only expect a few channels, but we'll see. Again, assumptions, time will tell.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. I think that was a pretty awesome discussion on Lightning, people. Definitely subscribe to the World Crypto Network if you guys haven't yet. Hit the thumbs up button. That helps us get into more people's feeds. And yeah, I'm definitely enjoying the conversation so far. So hope you guys are as well. I think we can move on to the second topic now. We're going to say, so now that LedgerX has launched, you know, this is the first regulated entity to have a unified way to buy and sell Bitcoin via swaps and monetize the volatility with options. I mean, that thing saw over $1 million in trading derivatives in the first week. So, you know, this is a little bit more kind of Wall Street stuff. But let me ask you, Jack. What do you think about this options market? Do you have any knowledge in this and anything to like have us maybe look forward to?
So I personally am not a finance guy, but I got into Bitcoin because my father is a finance guy. His career was in finance in Chicago. And I am beyond excited about this. Reason being is that, in my opinion, Bitcoin is traded at a massive discount, accessibility discount. Absolutely massive. When you talk about Bitcoin's value proposition and its target customer, a lot of these like giant hedge funds that would like to allocate capital or Wall Street money, we talk about this institutional money. At best, it's irresponsible, and at worst, it's disastrous when you're talking about allocating the size of capital and keeping it in an exchange like, you know, Bitfinex or whatever. And, you know, these exchanges announce that all of a sudden they don't have banking relationships and stuff, and that stuff's dangerous. And the amount of risk that, you know, some of this money would accumulate by, you know, learning, you know, how public and private key cryptography works and trusting an exchange like Bitfinex. So once we get these more regulated contracts in and someone can actually hedge a position with options, you're going to start to see an onboarding process of some serious money now that isn't accumulating as nearly as much risk. And you'll start to see this discount get priced out. So that'll reward us hodlers. So that's my opinion. I'm super excited about it. Great news.
Awesome. Very cool. Very interesting. All right, let's go with Andy next. Andy, what do you think about this LedgerX, this options market coming into play and doing $1 million in its first week? What do you think?
Right. Well, obviously, someone who's followed the manipulation of the gold market for so long, I'm always leery of derivative markets like futures and options. But that said, again, you know, we talk about $1 million. It sounds like a lot. It's really not a lot at all. But it's early days. I mean, it's the earliest of days. And what I do expect, yes, this particular contract says that it's backed by Bitcoin. It can't be leveraged, margined. But in time, all that stuff is going to come. There's no doubt. But what Jack says couldn't be more correct, because, you know, it's like I see these articles, you know, Zero Hedge, which still doesn't get it. They'll say Wall Street says that Bitcoin is the most crowded trade, being long Bitcoin. I have to laugh at that. You know, and they usually will answer that right at the end of the quarter when they're, you know, trying to window dress by buying GBTC, which is pretty much like the only thing that they're allowed to buy. Or maybe they go to that Swedish ETN note that you know, that mimics the price of Bitcoin and now Ethereum, because they don't have many choices. Wall Street people, they cannot do anything right now except in their personal accounts. There's no way that they'd be allowed to put money on Coinbase or even Bitfinex. They have to have regulated products to put money into. And I think the reason that the ETF wasn't around, wasn't approved, was simply there just wasn't enough comfort that the product was stable. And so my guess is between the price now being $100 billion, in which case it's really the lobbying efforts just from the Wall Street to get these things is going to be enormous. But more importantly, that the stability of the network is now coming into play, to the point that the LedgerX was actually approved. And my guess is that as soon as we get past the segwit 2x and nothing terrible happens, that there's going to be an absolute flood of ETF products, good or bad, I don't know, but for the most part, I think what Jack is talking about is the biggest part of it. Wall Street will now be allowed, and they will indiscriminately put positions. As I said, when we had $100 billion market cap, it is now, in my opinion, an official market asset class to the world, whether you're a government or an institution or an office, a family office. So I expect that LedgerX is just the beginning of something which ultimately, you know, there's an upside and a downside of derivatives markets. But for the most part, the biggest issue of all is that it's going to enable the big money of the world, which has not been in on getting to $100 billion market cap to get in.
Awesome. Yeah, they're going to get some expensive coins, as they should, for coming in as late as they have. So they're going to have to deal with a $10,000 Bitcoin more than likely pretty soon. So very, very cool. Thanks for that commentary, Andy. I think that, yeah, I mean, people are pretty much going to completely underestimate the price of Bitcoin next year once Wall Street really gets in with these ETFs and options markets. Let's see, let's go with John next. John, what is your commentary on the conversation so far, and what do you think about this LedgerX options market?
I don't have too many comments on it. I know that LedgerX was working on this for a long time and worked really hard, and I'm glad that they finally, were approved and were able to come out with what they were working on. I do have kind of a question, maybe, which is, he mentioned being, a little wary or worrying about derivative markets. Do you think that Bitcoin is either going to be a more resilient or a more susceptible economy to a systemic risk of a lot of money being weighted into derivative products like this through the traditional markets and somehow having an effect on the decentralized market aspect?
Well, you're going to have, on one side, it's going to become far more liquid, which is going to reduce volatility. And then on the other hand, you throw in some of these products that's going to make it more difficult for the average person, because you're going to have some wide swings, but at the same time, the overall volatility is going to lessen, and people will learn that very quickly on Wall Street and how to capitalize on it. And I think the Bitcoin community of hodlers is going to get used to it, just like we've gotten used to it's amazing to watch every single day the rise and fall. So we'll get used to it pretty quickly. When I say I'm leery, it's more like I've watched for so many years a fractional reserve system come out of the derivatives markets, but more importantly, kind of an illegal, a lot of covert activity, distorting of, for instance, gold behind the scenes, and creating multiple, like 100 times more gold than actually exists. But I don't think that's going to really be possible right here, because, for instance, because of the blockchain, it's a lot more transparent where all the Bitcoin is. And also, one of the things that the central banks have had has been that they have had huge positions in, for instance, gold. Whether they've, distorted them or not, people think that they have them. Everyone knows that there's no central bank that has any kind of position of size. And in fact, if we found out that they did, it would probably make the price go much higher. So I think that the ability of the players that don't want it to work to do much about it is going to be a lot less. So when you see, Jamie Dimon crying at fraud and the price doubles, and the Chinese government cries fraud and the price doubles, you realize that the decentralized nature of Bitcoin is a lot more difficult for the powers that be to handle. And so far, neither Wall Street nor the governments have been able to do anything. And for people that say that they're going to, I couldn't disagree more, because I think that I really do believe that this is the first time in history that the people actually realize that this is a winnable war. And there's no way it's going to be the futures markets like in, for instance, gold or the S&P 500, where the powers that be are going to, quote, win.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Awesome. Any follow-up to that, John? Or
no, that's about it.
Very cool. So very awesome. Thanks, Andy, for that. Let's go ahead and go to Francis last year on this topic. What is your comments on the discussion so far?
Well, first of all, I like Andy's comments about being wary or concerned about these financial products, because there are the devil is in the details of how those financial products are implemented. I won't really go deep into them, but for example, if you look at the way that the Winkovault ETF was constructed, it it did lend itself to some easier market manipulation. Just by the way, I'm an advisor of a company that is doing such a one of those kind of financial products. There's different ways to do it. You can have a closed-end fund, which is less manipulable. There's at least, I think, like 8 or 9 companies seriously looking to do that in Canada right now, by the way. So it's definitely an international phenomenon. So yeah, there's different ways to implement those things. I don't really know LedgerX's the implementation details, so I couldn't say. One thing I want to say also is Jack's comment that Bitcoin is trading at a massive discount, and the way that I agree completely, and the way that I kind of explain it is that in my mind, like there is a demand for Bitcoin, that people who want a position in Bitcoin, and I would say that, like from my experience, it's about like 90% of that demand isn't actually getting into Bitcoin. I talk to, like, I have the privilege of talking to maybe more high net worth individuals on a day-to-day basis about Bitcoin, being kind of a bank whispering Bitcoin consultant type of person. And these people really have an extremely difficult time, and for many logistical reasons that are really boring. But like, for example, like the money they're allocated to trade is in a certain locked terminal with certain locked permissions, and that only has really privileged access to certain trading terminals. And if your financial product is not there, then the money just doesn't, you just cannot make those trades. So it's completely out of the question. It's even ridiculous to think they would like wire money to Bitfinex. It's not even, so, you know, as soon as that's the demand that already exists, these are people that are convinced, that want in, and that the market is just not matching it with the supply. So that's the massive discount that I'm seeing. And the last point was that, like, I don't know what SolidX is doing, but to me, one of the kind of, I guess, goals of Bitcoin, really like what we want to achieve, you look at international trade, you know, like oil being traded in Bitcoin, you know, a global commodities exchange based on Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is the actual settlement payment method for these oil transactions, these nuclear material transactions, these you know, intergovernment weapons transfers transactions, kind of backing that global commodity exchange. And in order to do that, to even have a chance, we need to have an options market. We need to have a way for these contracts to hedge themselves with enormous liquidity. So you know, obviously, we can't get to that goal without those financial instruments. That's for sure. We can't have Bitcoin be the global currency reserve for, you know, commodities and financial. And you know, to get that $1 trillion market cap, after we have those instruments which allow people to hedge themselves for those really long contracts. So I see it as a definite net positive. Just as Andy said, got to be really careful that it doesn't enable the enemies of Bitcoin to have this really easy way to manipulate the market and to create chaos and disruption, especially if you manipulate the market in combination with other events like forks, like internal struggles. You can really shift narrative to say there's causation in something. You can permanently institutionalize a certain, I guess, a policy in Bitcoin by making a certain price go up or down during certain event. For example, say that you are able to massively up the price of Bitcoin, or also massively crash it easily. Timing that with a fork can give you enormous power. So that is the kind of thing that the powers that be can sneak themselves into, you know, hurting Bitcoin with those market manipulation by leveraging these kind of community struggles. That's something we really need to be careful about, because I have a feeling it's already being done also.
Well, yeah, we've seen it. We've seen it being done with the kind of the spamming of the network there, and coinciding in with you know, Bitcoin Unlimited, right? They wanted to prove that fees were super expensive, so they, you know, I mean, this is all speculation, but this is what we've seen, and we believe it to be the miners, and we believe it because the miners can do it cheaply because they're mining the transactions. So, you know, this is the type of sneaky stuff that can get put in there. So very good warning, Francis, and thank you guys so much for that. You know, I'm hearing all this talk about options markets and things like that, but I mean, also there is $2 trillion in people's bank accounts as well, like in the U.S. just alone. So that's what's part of what's making you know Bitcoin rise to these crazy levels, is just only the regular people are seeming to be able to buy it. Now with the options markets, well, that's just going to be insane. So crazy price swings I'm expecting with that. And let me just ask you, Francis, as a follow-up question, maybe Andy too, but is there any other, because we've been speaking about options markets and ETFs, is there any other like large instruments, large financial instruments that are going to come into play in the next 12 to 18 months besides options markets and ETFs for Bitcoin on Wall Street?
It's something other than an ETF. It's called the closed-end funds. That's something that we can see happening. It's a little different. It's kind of similar to an ETF. That's all I can really think about. I don't know about you, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, look, we had the 3 ETFs that were in the works, that are still in the works, obviously, waiting for one to get approved, and one will get approved, and then they'll all get approved, and they'll probably wind up being 10 or 20 of them. A closed-end fund, like you say, it's one in which it's not open-ended, meaning you don't add more Bitcoin just because people buy the stock or whatever you want to call it. It just means the trust raises money, buys Bitcoin, and then trades either at a premium or a discount to that fund. And then if it gets at a premium, they sell more stock and buy more Bitcoin with it. And I hope that they have more of those, because those are far more honest. It's the ETFs, like in gold, for instance, the closed-end funds. There's no issues with the honesty of what's going on, but with the ETFs like GLD, there have been. And if there are ETFs out there, people have to look at the prospectus to see if Bitcoin can be lent out that's owned by the custodians. But I think, again, I mean, I'm not a technology guy, but it just sounds like with the blockchain, it's not going to be as easy to replicate paper Bitcoin as it is paper gold. But my guess is that as soon as we get through the year end and the 2x fork, there's going to be a slew of ETFs, and it's going to make the LedgerXs unimportant, because once you have a big one, say the Winklevoss one, where it's run by people that actually the mainstream knows because of like Facebook and stuff, it will rapidly become so big that people are going to worry that these things are going to corner the market.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty awesome stuff. Very cool. All right, well, thanks guys for that. I think we can move on to our next topic if nobody has any other follow-ups to that. Nope. Cool. All right, guys. So we got over 750 people watching us live. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you guys coming in here, talking with us on the chat room, giving us comments. We're really having a good time over here. If you guys could please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the World Crypto Network. That way you guys can get our content as soon as we start streaming, because if you may or may not know, the World Crypto Network does kind of specialize in live content. That's what we really like to produce. So when you subscribe, you of course get that email right away of us when we go live. So thanks again, guys, for joining us. We were having a great time. So let's move on to the final topic here. We're already going on a bit of an hour, so a little bit over time, but I'm loving the discussion so far. Let's go with this here. So Sweden has become the first country in the world to settle debt in Bitcoin. What I want to know, maybe from the panelists, and Jack, you first, do you think that other countries will follow suit, and how long do you think that'll take before country after country allows us to start settling debt in Bitcoin, because we see the price just continuing to rise?
Yeah, so this is a little bit out of my expertise. I'm excited to hear some of the other panelists talk about this, but I would assume pretty rapidly and pretty soon. This was just great news because it's another validator, right? Like Bitcoin is real, it's not going away, and a government just acknowledged it as a way to settle debt in a form of payment. And that was a big deal to me. So I love to see that headline. But that's about all I have to say on this one. I'm going to let the other guys go at it.
Vortex, are you saying that they're saying that the people can settle like their taxes and things like that by paying Bitcoin to the government?
Yeah, so I actually didn't use the word tax. I was looking for the word tax, but I did not find that. It was just, they just said debts. So I'm not sure what specific debts those are. But it is a recognition from the government that Bitcoin is like real money from a real government like Sweden. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. We'll go with you then, maybe next, Andy, and you can maybe comment some more on this, what you think.
Well, governments would be stupid. Again, you know, I write about in my blog things. I wrote Bitcoin is going to make and break governments. You know, we laughed about Vanuatu, and I don't know whether or not they're actually accepting Bitcoin for passport fees. But the governments that make wise choices have a chance at changing their role in the political hierarchy, and the ones that make poor choices are going to lose. Now, Sweden's a little weird because some ways they're going toward that cashless society. It's hard to tell if it's a positive or a negative, whereas the Russian cashless society is all bad. So, but I would say that, again, it's a start. The recognition of Bitcoin, as Jack mentioned, is the first step. And then eventually, as all their efforts, it's, you know, the Gandhi thing, you laugh at it, you fight it, and then eventually you join it or you lose. You snooze, you lose. So we'll see which institutions and which governments make the wise choices. And certainly acknowledging Bitcoin and asking people to pay you in Bitcoin would be a wise choice.
Very cool. Yeah, I will definitely, if my friends and family are listening, guys, I will definitely accept debt paid in Bitcoin. No problem. No problem. Like my friends are watching that, like, you know, borrow and steal my video games. You guys can pay me back in Bitcoin. I really wouldn't mind. Let's go with Francis next on this. Francis, what do you think about Sweden allowing this? And maybe what do you think, like, how long until we can actually start paying tax debt in Bitcoin in various countries around the world?
I actually have no idea what they did in Sweden. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of speculate. I'm assuming, so a lot of these news, they're, you know, a lot of the time they're really vastly over exaggerated. You know, you'll hear like, oh, suddenly there's 100,000 new Bitcoin ATMs in this country, and it's just because, I don't know, there's like, you can,
I think
you can
my favorite
buy a coupon or a voucher somewhere and like buy it. I don't know.
Francis, I think my favorite one was the one where Amazon accepts Bitcoin because some blogger said that they would.
Right.
So, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm not sure, but like what's likely to have happened is that, for example, let's say there's a case where someone owes money, and you know there's a court case. You know, was the money reimbursed or not? And if you can, you know, this is something that could have happened. For example, a judge could have said, oh well, we saw that there was a payment in Bitcoin that was done, and we consider Bitcoin to be, you know, real money, so that the payment of debt, for all intents and purposes, the court says that the debt has been paid off. This is something that, you know, could have seen happen. I really believe in hodling a lot. I believe in making hodling a lot easier and really lengthening that time preference for people. So I've mentioned it many times before. I really believe that we need to work on being able to lend Bitcoin, to be able to get some loans with Bitcoin as collateral, so you don't have to spend your Bitcoins now. If you think the price is going to go up, you can take a loan and pay it back later. I think paying your debts in Bitcoin is great. You can spend with that credit card. You can get that credit line. And if you really do believe the price of Bitcoin is going to go up, this is a really, really safe way to kind of go margin long, I guess. Much easier than going on an exchange and putting your actual Bitcoins there. You know, you don't want to do that. So anything that makes that easier, that's great. Obviously, I don't know about most countries, but in Canada, the Currency Act of Canada forces people to pay. Actually, Canadian currency is the only one which is like recognized officially as being good for payment of debts, payment of taxes, and so forth. So this is at the root of the network effect of fiat, is this obligation to use it for certain use cases that we all know that we're going to be using. Governments would be stupid to let go of that advantage for their currency. So I don't think they're actually going to allow people to pay taxes with Bitcoin. However, I do know that in some municipalities in Italy right now, thanks to the work of the Italian Bitcoin mafia and, you know, Mayor Giacomo and all those guys, they got a few towns, I think, in Italy to accept Bitcoin taxes directly. So that's good. Obviously, I know, sorry, not Italy, Switzerland, Italian part of Switzerland. So obviously Switzerland has a different kind of way to govern itself. I don't think, you know, Sweden is very anti-cash. It's very kind of controlling of the currency. So I don't see that happening. I think it was a misunderstanding. But also it just in Canada, people do pay taxes with Bitcoin, but they just they like most of the tax authorities are on the standard like billing lists. So any country any country where you have a payment processor like Bitwala or something like that, you can still hold Bitcoin and pay your taxes and never need to have fiat in your bank account. So that's already possible. But, you know, the governments don't accept the Bitcoin directly, obviously.
Yep. And I mean, you think they would one day as this becomes more and more valuable. I mean, I know Switzerland is trying to be the crypto valley, right? So we'll see if that's maybe one of the first places that actually does it. John?
And they're competing, just in Switzerland, they're competing between the cities and the cantons to attract those Bitcoin investments. Since Zug has been so successful, some of the other regions are trying to get after that market. So that's maybe why we're more likely to see in Switzerland, is because there is actually competition to attract these foreign investments.
Very cool. Very cool.
That's funny you should bring up Switzerland, because I was just talking this week, writing about, you know, what some of the big events could be to change mainstream adoption or the perception of it. And, you know, you mentioned Amazon.com, which at some point, you know, when they say things, you know, it's like Tone Vays, he says, well, they wouldn't because they're scared of the government. I'm going, well, why? I mean, there's nothing illegal about accepting Bitcoin. It's not like they're going to shut Amazon down. But if there's one, and then I said big countries, and if there's one country that I think is most likely to become a proponent of Bitcoin, it's Switzerland. I mean, they know how to protect capital and keep it in the country, and they have known that for thousands of years, and they don't need help from anybody else. So I would not be surprised if in the next year or two you see the Swiss all of a sudden not only buying Bitcoin but promoting it. I mean, someone's got to do it first, and I would bet it's going to be them.
Yep, someone's got to take the plunge. So, John, what is your comments on this situation so far?
Sure. When I first saw the article, it seemed kind of vague to me, so I tried to find, you know, other news sources that were covering it, and I found a little more information. And basically, what happened, it doesn't give full details, but the Swedish Enforcement Authority I think what they did is they seized assets of a business. It doesn't explicitly say that, but the amount that they recognized as value was as an asset worth about $3,000 worth of Bitcoin, and they used that as part of settlement for debt involved with whatever they were enforcing with that company. So it wasn't really them taking payments, you know, straight up or taking Bitcoin as a form of payment. It was more that they recognized Bitcoin as an asset, and that as something they could auction off to, you know, be part of whatever enforcement process they were already doing.
Gotcha. Yeah, the U.S. of course, you know, confiscated the Silk Road's coins and sold those off. Like 10,000 at a time or something over the course of a couple of years. So it's funny that the U.S. government clearly sees Bitcoin as valuable if it's selling it off. But that's just the way it is. We have a million different departments over here, and every agency wants to see it as what their agency does. You know, it's just the way it is. So very crazy stuff. Anything else to add, guys, for this topic? Very cool. All right. Well, thanks, guys, so much for joining us. We had over 750 live viewers at the height. We had a great time, talked a ton of stuff about Lightning. Very, very interesting. Had a great time, guys. We're going to be back again next Sunday. We are here every Sunday. I took a break last Sunday, needed some rest. Okay. But we're here every Sunday pretty much. Next month is actually coming up is our 2-year anniversary. I've been doing this show for 2 years next month. So we might have some stats and have all dress up nice, fancy, and have a nice show about that. But that should be a good time. But let's go ahead and say goodbye to our guests. Andy, tell us, where can we find more about you, Mr. Andy Hoffman?
Right. CryptoGoldCentral.com. I've now been in business for, I don't know, 6 weeks. It's been so rewarding. I've posted probably 300 blog posts, and as a result, I've made new friends everywhere around the world, and I'm just thrilled. So CryptoGoldCentral.com, try a free 7-day trial, and you can contact me at ahoffman@CryptoGoldCentral.com. Awesome.
Awesome. All right, Francis, tell the world, where can we find you, sir?
The world can find me on Twitter, which has become an obsession, I think, like a bunch of us for the past 7 months. So @FrancisPoulia_. If you really must sell Bitcoin and you're Canadian, do it on bills.com. You can pay your bills with Bitcoin. And if you are in Montreal, or actually if you're an engineer and you want to make some money consulting, we at Galaxy.com are building kind of a portfolio of kind of technical subject matter experts that we get on retainer. So whenever like we have a client that wants to do some consulting and needs something to be done, we don't have to hire people. You don't have to become staff. If you have a startup or something, you can become one of our consultants. So check out Galaxy.com or email me if you're in Eastern Canada and want to do some consulting for some side money.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. Really appreciate you guys joining us. John, tell us, where can we find you, sir?
Bitcoin Errorlog on Twitter. My project is exotica.tv, and I appreciate you guys trying to pressure these NYA people to do an interview with me.
Yes, absolutely. It's been crazy times, you know, in Bitcoin. It really has been, and everybody, it's all happening on Twitter, you guys. I'm telling you, like, apparently everybody's on Telegram too. But I mean, I got enough to deal with just with Twitter, people. It's getting crazy. So thanks again, guys, so much for joining us. Had a great time. Jack, we have to say goodbye to our special guest before I forget. Jack, thanks so much for joining us, man. We really appreciate your advice. We really appreciate your work on Lightning and or on this particular wallet. And of course, we appreciate the Lightning developers, Miss Stark, right, and Laszlo and everybody out there. Roast beef, you guys, thanks so much. Jack, tell us, where can we find more about you?
I like to hang out on the internet. I'm just my name on Twitter. Core Slack, I hang out there a lot, and the Lightning Slack. So DM's always open. Ping me anytime.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jack. Your perspective has been very appreciated, sir. Guys, thanks so much for joining us again. We will be back here next Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific. So until then, guys, keep on talking Bitcoin. We'll see you later.